So are y'all located in Atlanta?
So we actually live fully mobile on mission for the gospel. Atlanta was home base. We sold our home and all of our possessions, and we live in a
Wow.
fifth wheel RV and we travel the country sharing the gospel. So
Wow. How's that been?
Atlanta, it's been amazing. This
Yeah.
is the completion of our first year, and we're in Atlanta right now because
Yeah.
it's where we did live before, and it's where the RV dealership is.
Yeah.
And since our warranty is about to expire, they're just knocking out punch items on the actual rig. So
Yeah.
I'm currently in my stepdad's mother's house. It's like full grandma house mode. Look at the curtains.
I was like,
I
those are nice
can't
curtains
find.
for an RV.
Oh, I was like, where is any neutral background that doesn't have an antique? So we are just crashing in her place right now, which ends up being helpful because it's like 4 degrees outside, and that would be miserable in our RV. But yeah, we're just here for about a month, and then we'll hit the road again.
How's that with kids on the RV?
You know what? It is actually amazing.
Yeah.
First off, it's like we have a big fifth wheel, but it's still in total like 350 square feet with 6 people because we have 4 kids.
Yeah.
And so you would think there's just the natural challenges of being in such close quarters, but they're the ones, their childlike wonder, their adventure, their love of the journey has actually been in moments where Jeremiah and I are like, we are tapping out. Like, this is too much.
Yeah.
What are we doing? Why did we do this? What is this? They have been the ones that have kept the fire and the excitement burning. And yeah, there's like challenges from every angle too. I mean, they'll have lamentations here and there of small things that crop up, but
Right.
most part, they're just down to party. They're like, let's roll. Where are we going next? We call our RV Bertha Jean. That's her name. And so every day, even now, our little 3-year-old is like, when do we get back in Bertha Jean? So they're just road dogs. That's like, they've loved it. They've adapted really well. And it's really fun. They keep
That's
us
cool.
excited about it when it's hard.
And think of when they get older, all that they will have seen.
I know. I know it. We did 18 states this past year, and
Yeah.
all of those like serving in ministry along the way.
Hmm.
But it was really cool. We took part of 1 month because we were so far out west to be like, let's just hit like Grand Canyon, the Great Sand Dunes National,
Gotcha.
those cool places. I'm like, if I were a 6-year-old surfing down a ginormous sand dune, that would be a core memory formed.
Oh,
I would like be like, what
100%.
is this? So I just pray they have perspective. Like, do you get most kids are sitting in a classroom right now? Because they don't. They've always been homeschooled. They've always been like,
Yeah.
on the road with us in ministry. And I hope they appreciate it as much without the perspective of like what normal is too, if that makes sense.
It does. I can relate because when we were in Germany, we were like 3 hours from Paris.
Oh,
And
wow.
it got to the point where my daughter was like, oh, we're going to Paris again. And I was like, whoa, time out. Do you know how snooty you sound right now?
Yeah.
But now she's like, oh, I go to school and I'm the only one who's been to, like, I think we took her to 27 countries. And she was like,
Oh,
none of her friends have even, some of them not even been out of the state of Alabama. So she's
right.
like, I'm so fortunate. And you'll be surprised the things that they'll remember. There's things that I'm like, I don't know why I did that with Becton. No way she's going to remember it. And then she's
Yeah.
like, oh, I remember that clear as day. So yeah.
Wow. That's the prayer. I'm hopeful for that.
Oh
That's
yeah.
good to hear. That's encouraging.
Yeah. That's so cool. Well, I got some little fun questions to throw at you, almost like a little rapid fire
Oh
round
boy.
here.
Okay, here we go. I'm ready.
Other than yours, a book recommendation.
You're gonna make me go real intense real fast. I just read the most fire book. It's unheard. You won't have heard. It's called Deliverance from Demonic Curses and Covenants by Reverend James Solomon. And he grew up as a grandchild and the child of 2 high order witch doctors in Africa and saw so much. And
Yeah.
Jesus radically entered and transformed his life and saved him out of witchcraft and the occult. So he's like on fire for the Lord now. I told you started a light
Wow.
question. His book was fire from start to finish. Like, I could have run the Boston Marathon after finishing it. And it's just full of great prayer points, resources, keys for understanding. It was fire. Not a
Yeah.
light read, but if you want your
Mm.
life to shift, go read that book.
So we'll put that under the resource recommendations. I was having a conversation with my wife last night, and I was telling her, I said, the Bible to me is the most underrated leadership book out there. I mean, anything you need, life lesson, it's
Right.
there.
Right.
Whether you're religious or not, it's there for you to pick up and understand. So yeah, I'm gonna write that down. Now I'm intrigued. You sold it to me. Guilty pleasure.
It's a good question. What's coming to my mind right off the bat are just like when you have 4 kids and you live in tight quarters and there is a sweet or like ice cream or like something that you really don't want to share.
Yes.
It becomes this covert operation to get that and indulge in it and enjoy it without being caught or without being fined. And
Mom's going
sometimes
to the restroom real quick.
yeah. Mom has to go to the bathroom. I remember my husband and I got this big jug of these chocolate covered raisins. That sounds so silly, but it was nostalgic to what his grandparents do. And we were like, this is for our game nights when the kids go to bed. They can't know we have the chocolate covered raisins because we're going to play like Rummy Cube, whatever. And this is when we'll eat these. So we had to hide them back in the pantry. Naturally, we got exposed and the kids ate half of them, but it was fun while it lasted. The adventure.
I can relate to that story. What is something that you try to avoid at all cost?
Oh my goodness. That's a really good
It's
question.
probably pumping gas on that thing.
Oh, diesel prices would be a really valid answer. I was going to go more intense and answer liars because that's what came to my mind. Try to constantly be discerning the character of someone, humble, wise, but also being wise as a serpent, gentle as a dove. Keep distance when you see that someone is lying, but also diesel prices if we want to stay lighthearted.
Okay, we'll go with both of those.
When we mobilized on mission last year, when we full-time hit the road, I budgeted in our expected budget from what I could maybe gander, like $450 a month for gas. End of the year, averaged it all out, $950 to $1,000 a month for diesel for the amount that we were traveling and moving. And I'm like, that pains me down to the depths of my soul. So
you're a little off.
I was a little off. Any gas points, any discounts, any Kroger points that I can then apply to gas.
Inflation, all that stuff factors in probably.
Oh, a lot of inflation. Yes, but we're making it. We're making it.
Bucket list place to visit with the family.
That's a great question. I would really love, well, I'll keep it specific to where we could RV, like in our home. I would love to go Pacific Northwest, like Oregon area, Washington. For the natural beauty of that state.
Yeah.
Then like into the Dakotas would be incredible. We have not hit that area of the country, and that would be bucket list. I'm hoping there is a cause for us to go that far Northwest this year.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's I agree with you on that one. And then really interesting question here. I'd love to ask guests this, get some really, really deep answers. You could have dinner for 3 with 3 historical figures who are no longer with us.
You're just going to expose what a Bible nerd I am. Obviously, Jesus is going to be one of them.
He's been invited to almost every single one that I've asked. So
is
that's
he?
good.
Okay. So
yeah.
I'm not a total Bible thumper for that. Jesus for sure. And I still would probably go. I mean, it'll sound lame, but Apostle Paul, apostolic in nature. And then I'm going to say too, also going to be biblical, but I'm going to say the Samaritan woman at the well, because that was the woman who Jesus encountered when she was in throes of shame, married 5 times. It was the first person in all of the scriptures that he revealed himself fully to as the Messiah. She was actually the first evangelist. It says she drops her buckets. She ran back to town to tell everyone about Jesus. And I'm like, why don't we get to know any more of what came of her life and her story after that? We see this place of being in the shadows, this incredible encounter that transformed her with this love and this redemption and this like, I still have more story for you, activated her in power. She went and evangelized. It said that many believed as a result of her testimony, and they begged Jesus to come to that town, and
Mm-hmm.
many more were saved. But I'm like, if we could know the continued story, what were then the challenges she faced? Because we all then butt up, right, against like the backlash from our past coming
Mm-hmm.
back to haunt us, from people talking about us, from doubt, or from false accusation. What did she then navigate through, especially if she was still alive and would have been hearing word of like that Messiah who met her at the well, then went on, he was then crucified, he then rose from the dead. Like, I would love to just sit with her and be like,
Unpack her
what would
story.
that journey look like for you from beyond what we get to read about?
Yeah.
So I'd say Jesus, the Apostle Paul, and the Samaritan woman.
That's good. And she's her story kind of reminds me of the allegory of the cave
Mm,
from the Greek philosophy, like the whole, seeing the sun going back, saying what you saw.
yeah.
You had some that believed you, some that did not believe you. I just, yeah, that would be interesting to unpack that. So that was a really good answer right there. Okay. Now let's get into your story a little bit. So talk to us about your upbringings in Georgia, if I'm correct.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
what was family life like for you as a kid?
It was good. I grew up in Marietta, Georgia, so it's just
Mm,
outside of Atlanta.
yep.
And I grew up in a wonderful household. I mean, middle class suburbs, really was sort of the framework.
What'd your
Dad,
parents do?
mom, my dad was an attorney. My
Okay.
mom was like a marketing consultant.
My dad was an attorney.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay.
He
Oh,
was a
yeah.
defense attorney.
I was going to say my dad did defense and then also
Yep.
sometimes would do prosecution side of things, but most
Yep.
of the time he was criminal defense. Um, my mom had her own business, but she was in marketing. And then I had one older sister who, if you could birth brains and brawn, I was brawn because I was the athlete, and Sloan was brains. She's brilliant. I lacked the brains significantly as a child. She wasn't trying to go out there on a sports field. We were very, very different. Um, but I look back and I'm grateful for those differences. It
Yeah.
taught me a lot when I wanted her to be just like me, and she wasn't. It
Mm-hmm.
teaches you a lot just about teamwork in the family. So, grew up in what I think most people would look at and see as, okay, a stable middle class American family. I was very determined. I was very athletic, very gifted athletically, also just in my mentality and drive. When I would excel at something, it would get like all of me. And so pretty early on, realized I was a very good goalkeeper, soccer, a very good soccer player, goalkeeper specifically, and just put all my eggs in that basket. I remember when I was 9 years old. So what is that? First grade, second grade.
Yeah.
A neighbor next door, their son went to college on a college scholarship for soccer. And at 9 years old, I don't even think I fully knew what scholarship meant. But I told my parents, look them straight in the eye, if you will support me through like my soccer, if you will keep helping me play and move through these teams, I will get a full ride. I will get a full college scholarship and you won't have to pay for my college.
Done.
I never forgot those. My parents were like, where are we going? What are we doing?
Yeah.
Write a check. Where's the next tournament? But I was just very driven.
Yeah.
Um, and that was amazing. And then it was also like my Achilles heel because I
Mm.
became a perfectionist, a performer, um, rooted almost in this need for perfection, performance, for acceptance. And it wasn't always healthy in that. And I love my father, but it's just the truth of how things were kind of behind closed doors. But if I played well, if I brought home good grades, if I excelled, I was like daddy's best girl. If I didn't, if I lost a game, if I let in easy goals, if I brought home a bad grade, I would get the silent treatment, the
Yeah.
tight jaw, the silent treatment, just the shutdown. And so I think I began to frame what was a healthy drive, and things set up around me for success quickly became unhealthy in the intent, in that I walked on these eggshells trying to make sure everyone saw me, was proud of me, was impressed by me. Therefore, since I lived by the praise of man, I died by the criticism of man, or loss
Yeah.
or defeat. I would just just extreme. I was an intense,
Mm-hmm.
which, benefits us in some ways, but in other ways, if it's not healthy, it can be to our detriment. And so I think from the outside looking in, it probably looked like we looked good, but on the inside, there were just broken things, like in every family, broken
Yeah.
things in myself. Was successful to everyone else's perspective, but again, was struggling with control issues. Those started to manifest into like eating disorder, anorexia, evolved into bulimia, evolved into like abusing diet pills, energy pills when I'm in high school, just secretly taking these things, exercising like 6, 7, 8 hours a day, just became obsessive.
Consumed. Yeah.
Yeah, consumed. And my identity just rooted
Mm.
in my pursuits. And I remember just struggling relationally. My dad was so amazing when we were like little kids, and then suddenly we're teenage girls with attitudes and moods and control issues. And it
You
was just
probably don't even know who you are.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And there was just felt like always a tension in our home. I think there were tensions around too, like our power would get shut off or our water would get shut off. And as a kid, through that perspective, you're like, you don't really know what's going on. I
Yeah.
mean, parents present like everything's okay, but things just weren't all okay.
Yeah.
Um, and so I remember I started to get very, very sick with the eating disorder in high school and just faking it, wearing these masks for everybody that I was fine,
Mm-hmm.
praised by everybody. You're so successful. You're so committed. Behind closed doors, I'm like falling apart. I am very sick, physically hurting my body, just enslaved to these thoughts, this performance. And I ended up getting a full ride scholarship to LSU, Louisiana State University. Like I had told my parents when I was 9 years old,
Mm-hmm.
I'd had a very successful soccer career, even in the midst of all the crud. And I got the scholarship to go to LSU. And I remember seeing that really as like this transition point.
Mm-hmm.
I was very sick. It was almost like there's great gain, but like, what's the cost here?
Yeah.
I'm not happy. I'm not well. And I remember seeing that as a transition point in my life of like, I have a new chapter here. Do I want to carry this into it? Or is there hope that things could change? And I remember just opening up to my mom one day before going off. I actually graduated high school early, semester early, to go to LSU and start training in
Mm-hmm.
this season before like the fall season, because I was going to be a starting goalkeeper. And I remember just in that first semester of senior year, something just shifted. I just opened up about everything, about the eating disorder, the control issues, the way I'd been hurting myself. And she worked to get me in with a counselor and a nutritionist and get me help. But ultimately, what she instilled in me was, you're about to go 8 hours away from us. There's
Yeah.
no more like, I'm okay because I'm okay in my parents' home. Oh, I have faith because my parents have faith, or this is my identity because this is my family's identity. You are about to go into a new chapter of your life, and you need to decide if you are going. And I mean, just full disclosure, she was like, I can help you in all of these ways to be healed, but you have to decide if you're going to pursue the healer,
Yeah.
because there is one who can actually heal and transform and save you from the inside out. But there's no more like faith by inheritance. There's no more like, I'm gonna do the Christian thing because I see others in the Bible Belt in Georgia around me doing it. It's normal,
Right.
right? She's like, if you're going to be making this shift into a season of independence, you have to decide whom you'll pursue and whom you'll follow and whom you'll trust. And that was really huge for me because I didn't have all the answers. I didn't have full understanding. I didn't know what that was even going to look like, but it shifted a perspective for me going into college, on who the center of the story was actually intended to be.
Mm-hmm.
I had lived my whole life. I often talk about with like this helmet of mirrors, I felt like around me. I was the center of my life, my story. It was about me.
Well, I like
Therefore,
that.
when I succeeded, I received the pride. When I failed, I was crushed from the inside out. Everything and every relationship in my life, from my parents to my friends to all of them, in my perspective, were framed around myself. It's the only vantage point I could see.
Yeah.
And the challenge from her was like, your vantage point has to widen or it's not going to go well for you. Like,
Mhm.
you've been trying it, but is there someone or something bigger than you that you're actually a piece of the story, that he's actually in control
Yeah.
and working all together for your good, if you will allow it, if you will release the control. So that's sort of summarizes, I guess, in a flyover, a bit of my childhood and transition to college.
And so much to unpack from that. And I mean, first, where did your love for soccer come from? Was it just one of the sports you tried out at the YMCA and were like, wow, I'm pretty good at this? Or is there?
Yeah, good question. I don't know where it began. I started playing when I was like 6 years old. I feel
Yeah.
like maybe everybody in their closet somewhere has the posed picture of them on their knee holding the soccer ball at
Oh,
6 years
yeah.
old.
With the little times, the year stamp on the bottom corner. Yeah.
Yeah. The Olin Mills
Yeah.
stamp. Like, this was the photo. But I remember I grew 7 inches in seventh grade. I was
Wow.
almost 6 feet tall by the eighth grade. And I had done several other sports. I really enjoyed horseback riding. I had done gymnastics. I was like one of the top in the state for gymnastics. And at the same time doing soccer. And I think I could just look at my growth curve. Gymnastics probably wasn't going to be like my ultimate path. But I just had a love. I grew in size and stature, which helped, especially for the goalkeeper position. But I just loved the game. I loved the pressure that a goalkeeper carried. If you make the save, you've saved the day. Like, it's your every move you make is pivotal. And I told you I really enjoyed the pressure. Like, I was just intense. So I
Well, it's
think
crazy because it was still kind of like that you focus too. Like, I'm responsible for the win or the loss.
Yes, 100%. I won't fast forward too far in the story, but once I actually came to know Christ and he started changing my heart, I became not as good of an athlete. Like,
Oh, okay.
when
Yeah.
I was me focused, I was competitive as all get.
Hmm.
I was the best. Like, there was no one that was going to be better than me. I remember at 11, I started to sneak into the 17 and 18-year-old boys goalkeeper training sessions. Now, my sneaking was pretty obvious. I think the coach asked me to leave the first time. The second time when I came back and showed up, I'm like, I'm here to train and I'm dressed, so can you let me in? And he's like, nervous. Like, but then finally he was like, you know what? If you are going to put yourself in this environment, then you have to understand I'm not going to take it easy on you.
Yeah.
You're saying you want your standard to be that of what are the almost college level teenagers at our club. And you're like 11, 12 years old. So what you're saying is you don't want your standard of excellence to be on par with the other 11 and 12-year-olds you're competing against. You want your standard to be here. Therefore, we are going to train at this level. And if you can hang, you'll hang. If you can't, go ahead and go. He was very intense. And I loved it. I loved it. I loved the pressure of that. I actually think that's rolled over into areas of my life in really beneficial ways. I wanted to be stretched beyond what was norm. And so I just loved the sport. I just loved the sport. I also loved being a goalie and not running long distances. It was key for me staying in the sport.
Well, you
I'm like,
really didn't have to run long distance. You could kick 90 yards away. So
yeah, there we go. I'm like, if I can just make my foot game strong, if I can have a powerful leg, I can chill back here until it's time for me to
yeah, till my second game of my collegiate career. So also you mentioned something I really want to talk about, and it's especially me as a parent and growing up, product of 80s, 90s parenting. But I know for me, one of the things you mentioned was the grades, the performance. There was times where I played, youth sports, and my dad was disappointed with my performance. He was the hardest. I hated my dad as a coach. I hated him as a coach
Yeah.
because I felt like I got the brunt of everything on the field and everybody else was great job. I'm like, they just struck out. But and my mom was hard too. And bringing home grades, it was the whole, I got to hide my grades. I got to,
Yeah.
oh, there's an excuse as to why I did this or that. And then I talked to someone on here and they brought up how, you know, parenting, I don't know why it's not great. You got, 8 A's and you have this 1C, as opposed to just punishing them for it. Let's have a conversation about what went wrong with this grade, or how can you bring this grade up. So I think that's something that I've changed in my delivery, but also not just the willingness of your mom to actually listen to you, but it's that something a lot of people now struggle with is the distractions of cell phones. And hey, I need to talk to you. Okay, well, I'm busy. I'm on the go. But to be able to sit down and have that conversation, what did that mean to you for that 1 hour or whatever it was conversation, that your mom was willing to take that time and just sit there and listen, almost like judgment free in a way?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And honestly, it brings my heart. It reminds me to be grateful for the balance that I did have, I think, between my dad and mom, that they were similar in many respects, but different in others.
Yeah.
And my mom was one. I hope she listens back to this podcast because she has to hear me share my testimony so often, which I'm sure feels like this reflection of like, whoa, they must have had some broken home. I want her to know and hear and to say so many ways that my mom saw me.
Yeah.
Beyond the athlete, beyond the student, beyond what everybody else cheered on. I mean, I did like some acting and some radio. I just a lot of different endeavors. Beyond any of those works, my mom constantly sought to see me as the person, as her daughter, of course, but also she always honored and respected me as a person. Yeah. Like a person put on this earth for purpose, of course, but not just as a machine to produce, like a person to be and to be healthy and well and contribute. And she always, I don't even think I realized how much words of affirmation was one of my love languages until after I was out of my mom's house. That's no rag on my husband. He does an amazing job with it. But my mom kept my love tank so full in like the deep seeing words of affirmation. Like, I love who you are. Yeah. You are so determined. You have such a strong will, but that's not a bad thing. It's just a thing that needs guidance. Like, she would always speak these words over me that went to the heart of who I was. They weren't just what I heard from everybody else about what I did.
Yeah.
And so that time of conversation with my mom wasn't an unfamiliar time. I can remember more times sitting on the little love seat in her bedroom, or on the corner of her bed, or on like in her closet while she got ready and I just smelled perfume, those like core memories. I can remember more of those times than I can count, but that moment wasn't unfamiliar in that regard, as much as it was that I finally was vulnerable about this thing I'd been keeping secret for so long, like this eating disorder and these control and these struggles. And so I think because she had always cultivated that environment with me as a parent, it created a safe place when I was ready that those words could fall and know they would be received. I saw hurt in her eyes. I believe I remember her crying. I know it grieved her, but she still she received it graciously. And then she sought to get me help.
Yeah.
And that is so core to how I choose to parent now. Because I do think in our country, especially in our culture, the whole work, I mean, I go to spiritual levels because that's just how I'm wired, but the whole work of the adversary right now is to keep us distracted, consumed, gluttonous, unintentional, like not focused.
Right? Self-absorbed in a way.
Self-absorbed, idolatrous. I mean, we will just sit and binge things. And yet there's real life and real people all around us
Yeah.
who need to be seen and known. And so in our family, we're so intentional about like
It's the word I was going to use.
yeah, our
Yeah.
boundaries, our yeses and nos, what our children do independently versus what we do as a family. And anytime I say this with so much like, if anyone is listening, let it not fall on deaf ears. I try my hardest anytime one of my children says, Mommy, can I talk to you about something? Mommy, can we have a moment? Mommy, can we to say yes. What is it? I want to listen. I want to know. And that's hard because I can be just as guilty of having my phone up in front of my face or having the to-do list or having the work.
But it may be that one moment they feel vulnerable to talk to you about something.
That one moment,
Mm-hmm.
I'm so sorry that this keeps dinging. I don't know how to make it not ding if you're hearing that audio. But yeah, it's just it really could be that one moment that they are finally at the place to share something. And if we are not present and available, that moment won't happen.
It may pass by.
What will happen is that they will go to the world, or they will go to find another source or another mentor or another form of leadership. And you won't have the grace anymore to have the checks and the accountability and the covering over, hey, baby, who are you listening to? Who are you talking to? Who's that mentor you're receiving from? Like, they will have decided, you're not letting me in. I'm going to go find something that makes me feel like I'm seen. Mm-hmm. And that can lead down a lot of dangerous roads, right?
That's what I was going to say. It could go down a darker path. And, you know, I had a lot of conversations with my father. My father passed away when I was 11. And I remember he was kind of my go-to parent to go and talk to about things that were bothering me. And I remember I had so many conversations with him, but that one conversation I had where I finally opened up and told him something that I was going through. I was getting bullied at school. And I remember sitting on the steps of our house, heading to the upstairs, and we just had this heart-to-heart conversation. And I still remember that to this day. And a lot of what you just kind of alluded to it, which was going to be a follow-up, a lot of the things that we had in that conversation have impacted who I am as a parent today, right, and how I talk to my kids today. So it just goes to just the power of listening to someone and just talking to them. And another thing that I want to talk about, you mentioned the eating disorder, and it's something we haven't brought up too much on the podcast, but there may be someone out there listening who either has a kid that's going through that or they are going through that. What advice would you share on your journey of conquering that you dealt with?
Yeah, I'm glad we shared what we did with that included, because I think it gives a clear key that the eating disorder itself, at least in my story and my testimony, the eating disorder, how to break it down simply, what I was doing or depriving myself of, like how it was physically acting out in my life, was not the root of the issue. It wasn't that there were 10 other girls who were dabbling with anorexia, so I thought I should dabble with anorexia and that's it. Like, it wasn't that I heard something. The root of how that manifested, like that's what came of it. But the root way down was control, was fear, was pain, was wanting approval. There were so many, if you look at a plant, you see the stem and the flowers and the leaves that come off the top. But if you pull it up and you shake it out of the soil, the root system runs down. And the further you get down in the root system, the skinnier and the more like ample the tiny roots. If you really look like the plant is the issue of an eating disorder, you have to understand that under the surface, there is a root system that has continued to feed this unhealthy behavior. And those micro roots can be control, fear, shame, um, pain, trauma, uh, rejection,
Yeah.
um, you name it, you name it. And that, in my opinion, is going to be unique to each person's life and journey, what those roots are. But if we only address the symptomatic response, like if we only address what's growing out of it or the plant, we're going to be so frustrated. Why does my daughter continue to shove a hairbrush down her throat in the bathroom? Like, why does she rush away from the dinner table? Why? And it will, the frustration or the pain that will arise in us will actually be a pain of like desperation of like, what can I do to help? And the key for me of breakthrough and healing and freedom from that was myself and others around me ultimately praying and asking, what's at the root of this?
Mm-hmm.
Why? It's
As
the
opposed
why,
to just
right?
stop. Yeah.
Yeah,
Please
I
just,
can't just stop. I've tried a
yeah.
million ways to just stop. I don't love that my throat is killing me because I'm constantly purging. I don't
Yeah.
love that I keep all this secret, but I need to understand the why. Why do I feel the compulsion to do this?
Yeah.
Why am I so gripped by this? And when I began to process in my own story, just so much rooted around control and fear, rejection, and just pain. It was wanting to control something so that I would be enough, like that I would be good enough, that I would look good enough. I was 6 feet tall as a freshman in high school. I was stuck out like a sore thumb. I was built. I was muscular. I got the jokes and the teasing and the laughs in the hallways. And so I had to allow, even if that had occurred 4 years prior, when I started healing, I had to go to those places. Like, why?
Mm-hmm.
Where did this start? I've been exposed to pornography. I've been exposed to our culture movies and TV that showed these body types and these women that looked nothing like I looked. That was another root. Oh, there's insecurity here. I don't think I measure up. I'm trying to manipulate. I'm out exercising 6, 7, 8 hours a day to try to be enough
Mm-hmm.
athletically, but also physically. There were just so many roots. And I think the more vulnerable that we will live, I mean, the word of God says, humble yourself before me and I will lift you up. There is a key to humility and to vulnerability that doesn't try to just numb the pain or medicate the pain or turn to the next distraction, but is willing to sit back and say, wow, I need to take some time and some concentrated focus to press in and say, what's the why here? What are the roots here in my life or in my child's life or in the friend's life, whoever it may be? One way it may show itself as an eating disorder, another may be alcohol, another may be drug addiction, another may be perpetually moving from relationship to relationship, can never be
Yeah.
alone. Like the roots will manifest different things, will bloom different things, but in all of those cases, we still have to be willing to sit back and say, there's some heart surgery that needs to happen. There's some roots here that aren't good for me and they need to come out. And so, I think that's key. I think it's
Yeah.
key that we don't just put a band-aid over a bullet hole, but we ask the Lord to show us why. Why? That's what, I mean, I swing on the faith side in like all things because I know the freedom that Jesus has given me. And I know the power of the Holy Spirit to illuminate what's in the darkness. That's what the word of God says. And sometimes it's only by the Holy Spirit that we will pray on something, say, please show me a key. What is going on in my daughter's life? What has happened? And you will be going about your day or your business.
Boom.
Oh my
Yep.
goodness. Oh my goodness. Of course, it's like that's what the power of the gospel, what the Holy Spirit wants to do in and through us to make us well. Salvation means healing, wholeness. He's like a restorer, right? So,
Yeah.
uh,
People pray and want those instantaneous answers, but the prayers get answered in the most unlikely of moments at times. And I mean, even what you said about the mask, I mean, I think you were a prime example of that. It was, I was the star athlete. I was doing this and that, but eventually the mask quit coming off and it's just to the core as to who you were. And I think that advice was great about getting down to the root cause for not just bulimia or anything like that. It could be with alcohol. It could be with a relationship or smoking cigarettes or just anything that's why there's mental health physicians out there. That's why there's therapists. That's why there's chaplains, because those individuals can get to the root causes where, and sometimes you do need someone trained in that, as opposed to just talking to your best friend who's going to be like, I think you're fine. You just need to stop
Yeah.
doing this. And it's all right. Thanks.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's very good. And then, you go to LSU, and I do want to kind of ask you about this because I'm super curious about it. And then it's such a good story for. I have a 14-year-old daughter, and she's in that age range of looking to go to college and she's into basketball, she's into tennis, but you were not just a standout soccer player there, which, by the way, all-time leading scorer, or all-time school record with women's soccer with 35 victories. She has 25 shutouts. Even before that, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution Player of the Year. Just incredible stuff featured in Sports Illustrated. I mentioned the 90-yard kick, which is on YouTube. Go look at that. Perfect bounce and everything. I mean, it's there. But then you're like, you know what? Soccer's not just enough. Let's try out for a historically dominant SEC football program. How did that come about? And tell us about that story.
Oh my goodness. Yes. When you summarize it like that, it sounds a little wild. It was a process. Yes. I was recruited to go play at LSU, began to find that healing we were just talking about on that front, and had a really interesting time at LSU. College was an incredibly pivotal chapter of my life because I was moving through healing from that eating disorder, finding the roots of things, transform. And after my freshman year of soccer, after scoring the 90-yard goal, SEC, Louisiana Player of the Year, SEC All-American, all of this stuff.
Got what people want.
Got what people want.
Yeah.
Went home for Christmas break, and my dad put a gun to his heart and pulled the trigger. And suicide suddenly entered my story. And that was so traumatic, so out of left field, catapulted me into depression, into anxiety, into promiscuity, into what looks like the normal college experience of partying, drinking. But let's remember young Mo, who was like full focus, nothing could distract me. Yeah. So suddenly I'm like, whatever. Just began. I was so full of pain, hurt, rejection, anger, like I had never experienced before. And I couldn't hold it in anymore. I was just a different beast, especially behind closed doors. Seeing your dad's body on a morgue table at 19 years old. I even had suicidal ideations myself. Like I would begin to war in my mind. Well, your father did this. You're bound to do it too. You'll die young too. I would be in wars in my mind. I remember sitting one time in the, what's it called? The quad, like the main store at a college campus. What's it called?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, outside of the bookstore at LSU, sitting in my car with my hands around my steering wheel, just out of the blue, overwhelmed by an anxiety attack. My heart just a million miles an hour, my pulse, sweating, crying. It felt like I never knew what each day was going to hold when it came to pain, when it came to physical. I was losing hair, skin rash. It was just, I was not in a good place.
Yeah.
And moved forward through that, put on some new masks, tried to wear them, couldn't hold it all together, gave so much of myself away, fell in so many ways, thought I was strong, just a mess. And it was almost a full year after that I was headed home from Baton Rouge to Atlanta. So this is now after my sophomore year of soccer. Still able to pull it together enough on the soccer field.
Yeah.
I think all of us kind of have those things that it's like, it's such muscle memory. It's such a release. It's such like an escape. We can still show up for them, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean just because we're showing up and doing well, we as a person are okay. And I think that this is so out of the blue, but did you hear recently of the suicide of the one Twitch? He was like a dancer.
Breaks my heart. He was from Montgomery.
Oh man, if
Mhm.
you looked at that man, you'd say he was in his bag.
It's
He
scary.
smiles, able to show up, perform.
We had a
That
viral video with his wife right before dancing.
yes,
Just,
like the day before. That
yeah.
does not mean someone is well.
No.
And I was able, especially I think on the soccer front, to continue to show up and perform. It didn't mean I was well.
Yeah.
So my soccer career, if you were just looking again, like what we talked about earlier, people look at you through the lens of something. It would look like she's amazing. She suffered this loss. She's still showing up. She's breaking records. I mean, I think I had a record-breaking season that season.
Yeah.
That is not the extent of seeing someone. Just as I told you, my mom was so good at actually seeing me beyond those things. The actual me was not well. And I remember headed home from Baton Rouge to Atlanta after my sophomore year in a very broken place, very overwhelmed, suicidal ideations, hurt, angry. I think, and I'm sorry if this is a lot for your listeners. Lord has set me free from so much. I'm just an open book. I had sexted, like text who I was going to hook up with, random when I got back home, like to Georgia. I had all the means of coping with not being okay. And all the ways that war was still raging were just
Band-Aids
overwhelming me. And when I was driving home on the interstate, I'd been stuck in traffic and I was on the Alabama, Georgia line, and just zoned out watching the little lines tick by on the interstate. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning, just trying to get home. And the next thing I knew, my car was in the center median and my wheel is just cranking and jerking like the grass and the stuff that's in the median. I'm like, whoa, what is going on? Snap out of it. I pulled my Jeep back across, try to get back on the interstate. I just shot straight across, hit an embankment, flipped my Jeep several times, landed upside down, like in this ditch, this ravine on the side of the road, completely physically broken.
You hit a tree too, right?
Yet my Jeep didn't even have an engine on the front anymore. Like the front, maybe if the engine was there, it did not look like an engine. It was just shredded off because I'd struck things. And I'm hanging upside down by my seatbelt. I had broken cracked a vertebrae in my neck, my ribs, damaged my lungs, liver, jaw, face. It was a mess. And I was just hanging upside down. I came to choking on my own blood. And as wild as it may seem, it was hanging upside down in that wreckage when I came to that I was overwhelmed. Overwhelmed isn't an adequate word. I was overwhelmed by the sustaining love of God. I felt the presence of the Holy Spirit. I can't put a non-spiritual language around it because there is no language.
That's what it was, yeah.
It wasn't a euphoric moment because you hit your head. I felt the Spirit of the living God just flood into that vehicle and over me. And it was like in a moment, suddenly the sustaining love, the mercy of God. First, I thought that I was even alive after such a bad wreck. But it was just this moment of be still and know that I am God. I see you. I know you. I love you. I have plans and purpose for your life. You have been trying in all of your best efforts through all of these things. And look where it has you. It was like a physical picture of my spiritual condition. I was just annihilated.
Yeah.
And he's like, I want to bring you to life. I want to rebuild you. I want to use you for my glory. It's not just your life. Take off your helmet of mirrors. Like, I
Yeah.
love you. I died for you. I want to give you my spirit so that you are not trying to walk around victim to everything in this hurting, broken world. I want to give you a spirit that is not of fear, but is of power and love and self-control. And it was like, it happened like this, but all it takes is a whisper from the King of all kings, who is real and alive and well. If you're going to cut off the podcast because you just haven't experienced, I plead of you to press in. I'm speaking to your listeners right now, and not because you've tried everything else. You've tried every other avenue. You're still in bondage. You're still overwhelmed emotionally. You still have the wreckage that's consumed you. You still haven't been able to forgive the past. You still turn to the drugs or the alcohol or the screen or the next fix or the money or the job promotion or the Air Force promotion, hanging your identity and waiting always in this season of what's the next to make me feel whole. And in a moment, just like he said to the Samaritan woman who I'd love to sit down for dinner to, he said, you've had a lot of things said over you that you've believed, that you've carried, that you've walked in. I call you redeemed. I call you redeemed. And I was like, whoa. I'm sitting here promiscuous. When he took me through healing of my sexual sin, pages. I had to write out pages of names. I'm talking a reputation that preceded me, trauma, suicidal ideations, daughter of a suicidal man, struggled with eating disorder, perfectionist control, all of these things that want to speak a louder word over my story. That for anyone listening, all of the things of your past want to speak a louder word over your story. But I, in a moment of mercy, encountered the one who spoke a better word. And it took one word to drown out all of that noise. He said, follow me. I call you redeemed. You're mine. And I was like, I'll follow you every day for the rest of my life. I'll never look back. I'll never look back. And I had to heal. I had to physically withdraw from school. Sorry, you asked about football. But it all builds. I had to physically withdraw for the rest of that semester, heal. My body needed to heal. By the grace of God, I was able to go back the next year, walk through some physical recovery, some mental stuff, because I'd had some like residual stuff from some bruising on my brain. And the Lord was faithful, was able to play my junior season. And then as I was going into my senior season, I realized that NCAA athletes actually get 5 years of eligibility, but only 4 in one sport. So it's like a clock kind of. And you have 5 years to fulfill your eligibility, but you can't play 5 seasons. It's like this help year almost. Say you have to redshirt.
Minus the whole COVID thing where they granted that.
They have 6, 7, 8, 9 years.
Now you got guys who've been there since 1993, but
yeah. Got 64-year-olds who are like, I claim my eligibility still because of COVID. But for some reason at that season, I realized, oh, I have a whole 5th year. I can apply it to soccer. I'm going into my senior soccer season, and I had never had to redshirt or sit out in a season. And I'm like realizing I have this 5th year, actually. I don't feel like I'm done here yet. Like, what? Why is this coming to my mind, right? At the same time, I had always trained with the weight room facility, the indoor facility at LSU. The football team trained in is also where soccer would train. For years and years and years, I loved the weight room, loved to train, would always be in there doing extra, would always be in there on my own. And in those times too, would mess around a lot with my friends who were on the team, the football team, just kicking field goals, punting. There's a Mo Versus video. If you look up MEAUX Versus, it was like this fun promo series that we did where Mo would take on athletes from other sports. You can type in like Mo versus Brad Wing, and you'll see me. I punted like a 70-yard punt or something like that in the video with Brad, or it was a kickoff. We'd always just be messing around, just having fun. And I remember one day being in my apartment, and I was literally just in the shower, like just getting ready for the day. And suddenly it just surged back to my mind. you have the 5th year of eligibility, and you were recruited for your leg. You have power, you can kick, and I want you to pursue it. And I was like, washing my hair, like, pursue what? And I continued to feel like the Lord was like, I'm not going to tell you what the outcome's going to be, but do you have the faith to once again stretch yourself? Remember that goalkeeper coach when I was 11, 12? Stretch yourself beyond what the norm is and see what's possible. Will you like walk in the journey, even if you don't know if it's going to be a yes or a no in the end? And I'm like, I got out. I called first. This is actually what I said back in prayer. I was like, sure, I'll pursue it. And then the minute there's a closed door, when someone says no, it'll make it obvious. That's where I'm going to stop. Okay. So I call some of the kickers, my friend. I got this crazy idea. What if, like, because actually the situation at that time was there were just like 2 or 3 specialists, and one of them was about to graduate. Maybe 2 of them were about to graduate. And so there was actually also a need for specialists. Now, granted, the coaches are out recruiting. You're going to have walk-ons and whatnot. But it wasn't like there were 30 specialists and I'm randomly saying, I want to do it too. So I called up. I'm like, I have this wild thought. What would you think if, and of course, the first thing that came to my mind was I'm a woman. People are going to think this is some female
PR type thing.
PR.
Yeah.
And so I even like framed that with the guys. I was like, do you think this is like ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba? And they were like, are you kidding me? We've seen you kick. We've trained together. Go for it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. They're like, we know it's not because you're a woman. We've seen you. You earned your stripes. You put in your time. We've watched you for 4 years. Like I had, I guess I would just say street cred, like the players with the coaches. So I remember I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the weightlifting coach next. That'll be my next level of like
working up the chain of command there.
Yeah, exactly. I got to work my way up the chain of command. I go to the weightlifting coaches, Coach Moffitt. I'm like, I have this thought. I have a 5th year of eligibility. It falls in the fall, like when that semester. What do you think? And he's like, go for it. Like, oh, are you sure? Like, so I just started working my way up.
Where's Coach Miles?
Right. Working my way up the chain of command. And it was at the phase where everyone else had been like, I don't see why not. It's so interesting because when things did hit the media, it's always the people on the outside that don't have the inner vantage point that are like, wow, this is all because she's a girl. This is PR.
What gets clicks?
No one in-house was like questioning the motives. They were like, if you can outkick like who we've got, we need the leg. So I remember one day I was just working out and Coach Miles comes into the weight room and gets up on the elliptical right next to me. And my heart is about to explode out of my chest. I'm like, Lord, I couldn't have even found the end to schedule a meeting with him. He was a very busy man. And yet somehow I'm just sitting here at like 10 a.m. on a Tuesday between classes on the elliptical and he's on the next elliptical. And I'm like, hey, coach. And I remember just saying, hey, I want to talk to you about something. He was all ears. I told him what my thoughts were. And I don't remember the fullness of every detail of our conversation, but he brought up his daughter. He has a daughter who's an incredible competitive player. And he also said like, but if you actually want to do this, if you want to try this, it was almost exactly like Coach Hugh Brown, that goalkeeper coach. He was like, don't think there's going to be any corners cut or exceptions because you're a female. You're going to have to train. You're going to have to try out just like all the guys do. And if you have a better leg, if you can outkick our starting kicker, we need the leg. I'm like, what is happening, Lord? I thought you would instantly close the door and I wouldn't have to give my mom a heart attack that I could possibly get flattened like a pancake by a 350-pound SEC lineman. So I just started training and I was still I still had my senior soccer season. So I was like doubling up. I'd do all my soccer training, competition, practice, weightlifting. And then I'd get in the indoor facility and kick footballs and practice and train. And I remember I stayed that summer break voluntarily to train with the football team the whole summer break. Let me be so clear. Summer break training with the football team is not fun. It's like 150 up downs in 140-degree Louisiana heat, and your cleats are melting on the turf field. It just wasn't glamorous. But I was like, you know what? Lord, you've done too much. Anything is possible. And I don't know if it's going to be a yes or a no in the end, but there's some joy to be found in the journey. And it was really beautiful because that whole journey taught me more than I could unpack on the podcast. But I hit a 53-yard field goal, no pads, but I could hit a 53-yard field goal. I didn't know of any other females that were hitting 53-yard field goals. I didn't know of a ton of other college kickers that were always hitting 53-yard field goals, male as well. Like,
my program doesn't have a 53-yard field goal kicker, but
it was a really cool journey. And it taught me so much too, because what did happen was one day the media did catch wind. I'd already been training with them for like 7 or 8 months at that point. But finally the media caught wind, and that's when it blew up, and the Ellen show called, all this stuff. And suddenly it was this different beast, because it wasn't the purity of like, it felt like the purity of what the intention was. Everyone had an opinion on. You have to deal with blogs and fan websites, and this and that. So it kind of grew it and changed it into this different beast, but we just kept going.
It's almost like a test though, in a way.
It's a test.
Yeah.
And I remember in the end, finally my final tryout, which would have finished my soccer season, amazing senior year. That was all incredible. And started up a semester at grad school while I was still training. I think I ended up training 20 or 22 months on the back end on the football front. And then the tryout finally came, the final tryout. At that point, there were like 8 specialists. So there were walk-ons and transfers and other guys trying out. So it was a little different roster environment than when I had started the journey. But I tried out. I did my best. Ultimately, the answer to fully officially making the roster was a no, because I couldn't outkick Drew Alomar, who was the starting kicker and an amazing kicker. He had an incredible leg. And that stung and hurt and sucked. Like, you train 22 months, I mean, giving everything you have, and the answer was a no. And I remember being really sad for a little bit. And then the Lord was like, do you remember I didn't tell you what the outcome was going to be? I just asked you to trust me with the journey. And I was like, oh, yeah, I do remember you saying that. It was never guaranteed. But if I had known in the end that it was a no, would I have grown in all the ways I grew? Would I have trained in all the ways I trained? Would I have like trusted in all the ways I trusted? Right? No, I wouldn't have. I would have been like, bump that. I'm tired. But it was really cool, because I just feel like the greatest lesson I learned through all of that too was no isn't a word of dismissal. It's a word of direction. And I think sometimes we take the no's that we get and we carry such a rejection or a dejection or a failure. I didn't, da, 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 da. We don't have to carry the no's in our life like that. The word of God says that he uses all for his glory. In that time that I was even training with football, even when it felt like, come on, the media caught wind of it, do you know it opened ears and eyes to my actual story of overcoming and my testimony and the shadows that had been, and that I was walking in victory.
Exactly.
I started getting requests from people, please come speak to our young soccer players. Please come speak to our small group. Please, can you come just share? It opened up the doors for all that I walk in now, that had nothing to do with sport at the end of the day.
It's a spiritual resiliency it shine light on.
Yes, it had to do with, hey, you, every single one of us, even the person listening right now, you have lived some life. You have a story. And if you have walked in victory, if you have known any degree of healing, if you are still standing, if you have come to know the one who sustains you, then there's a story to be told. And we're not to be ashamed of our weaknesses. We're to boast in the glory and the strength of God, in the glory and the strength of his sustaining love. And so I think there's the initial grief when we get a no, and that's valid, especially when we put a lot of time or energy or work in. But if we allow that to sit and fester and become something it's not, and we think, oh, I'm never going to try something wild again. I'm never going to take a leap of faith again. I'm never going to do that thing again because I got the no. We're like a victim mentality puppy with our tail.
Got to be a victor mentality.
We have to have a victor mentality. I'm like, okay, it's a no.
Next opportunity. No.
What's next? What's next?
Yeah.
And I think if we allow that resiliency to be trained in us, yes, my dad put a gun to his heart and pulled the trigger. I stand with life and life abundant. And I can speak now with authority and with power and with grace to anyone who has navigated suicide or loss. Thank you. That's a key to something that now can continue to have victory for others as well. Yes, I had a past of promiscuity and sexual deviance and addiction to pornography and all of these things. Oh, you set me free from all of it. You healed me. Now I write a book that sold tens and tens of thousands of copies and the New York Times bestselling author. So the number of people I hear back from that are like, I didn't know any other women dealt with pornography. I didn't know that can we talk about this? It's like, that's worth it all.
Yeah.
Every challenge, every shadow, the Spirit of the living God wants to shine light into it. And darkness cannot overcome the light. And so when the light is shined in those shadowy places, you gain a testimony out of it. You find a story to be told that was hidden in secrecy. It's like it takes the chains off your lips and you're able to speak and to share and to know victory. And the word of God says the power of life and death lies in the tongue. And when our tongue is bound because of fear or shame or shadows or disgrace or a no or a rejection or whatever it may be, all it knows is death to our bones. But if we will allow our mouths to open, to confess, to profess, to testify, we find life. The power of life lies in bringing what's in the darkness into light and sharing what's in the shadows. And the thing is, it can happen in really small places. Sometimes that looks like a spouse admitting something to another spouse and asking forgiveness and then processing. Sometimes that looks like a friend calling a friend and forgiving them, even when they haven't asked for forgiveness. Sometimes that looks like a parent and a child. Sometimes it looks like you're on this huge national stage and you get opportunities that you never could have fashioned, like an Ellen show, whatever it may be. But sometimes it just looks like one person on their knees in their own bedroom, laying themselves humble and vulnerable to say, please pull up these roots, because I know I'm meant to walk in greater strength. I am an overcomer. I'm meant to be an overcomer in Christ, and I can't do it in my own strength. And so I just think in all of our lives, greatness looks different. Sometimes it looks like honoring and yielding and being a stay-at-home mom, washing dishes and changing diapers so you can champion forward what your husband is doing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's a husband saying, I'm going to step back this season because you, babe, have something on your life that you need to pursue. It's like, it can take so many different forms.
Yeah.
And if we're faithful with opening and sharing and letting those shadows be lit up in the small ways, we'll understand the bigger and bigger and bigger ways that can take place through the rest of our life, right? Such a long answer. I'm so sorry. You're gonna have to do a lot of podcast editing.
No, this is all good. I've actually picked up a couple of things that I wanted just to touch on. For one, you mentioned your mother mentioning, the words of affirmation to you, or you realized that was perhaps your love language. And it's almost like she forecasted out some of the stuff that was going to happen when you were at LSU. And some of these struggles may rear their head if you don't have that safety of her. And then also the wreck, it was like God was telling you, like, hey, you've been in control. You've felt like you were in control, but in reality, I'm in control. Trust me, listen to my word. And it's like you had that moment that, like you said, should have been catastrophic, but it was eye-opening for you. And then what you were able to do after that, I mean, the outlook on no and the outlook on, every single thing that was from your past. We look at those more times than not, most of us, and it's almost like oh, I don't want to talk about that. That was shameful. That was, oh, I can't, that was, you have it just talking to random people. They'll be like, I don't even want to go back to that moment. My father passed away right in front of me when I was 11. My sister was murdered. I've had so many things wrong in my life, but I finally got to that point, kind of what you're saying, where you're like, it's part of who you are. I can help someone who's lost a family member. I can help someone who struggled with suicidal tendencies, and
Yeah.
they're blessings that we have those, and we're able to help others in need. And that's awesome to hear. I mean, because you're doing incredible stuff, to include New York Times bestselling author. You've got several books out there, and even the books, I mean, like Sex, Jesus, and the Conversation the Church Forgot. My wife is studying to be a psychiatrist, and she's basically we've had this topic several times, and I'm curious your take on it, especially being a mother as well. When do you think is the right time to talk to children about that topic of sex? Because it's very taboo. Like we don't speak on this.
Right.
And
Yeah.
but yet you have, it's this huge limit. You talk about it in school, you talk about it in church,
Yeah.
but kids who are 6, 7 years old being molested by people, being touched, and they don't know how to identify it. Are we not
Right.
teaching it early enough? What is your take on that?
Yes, I love this question so much. I'm very passionate on this front because if you look at our culture, there's this tabooed, oh, I sit down and have the talk when my son's 17. Well, the average age of exposure to pornography right now is 9 years old.
Yeah,
That's
you're
the
way
average.
behind at that point.
You have missed the boat.
Yeah.
You are so, so very behind. And I remember when we had my first daughter, we have 4 children. They are 7, 5, 3, and 1. And when I had my first daughter, when she was just about 2, maybe 2.5, I always tell this story because it's important. Poor my husband, but you'll understand. So one day when she's like 2.5, she toddled into our bathroom at the time. And we had this big glass shower. And my husband was taking a shower, and I'm like, getting ready. And she toddled in there. And for whatever reason, in that moment on that day, she just took this vested interest in my poor husband who's trying to shower. And she's just innocent as can be, just looking. He's like trying to shield himself, turning around.
Yeah.
And I remember the Holy Spirit just stopped me. And he was like, before you say a word, because I turned around and saw what was happening. He said, you have 2 options here. You can either freak out. No, don't look.
Get out. Turn around. Yeah.
And suddenly bring this intensity. But what that's going to do is it is going to log in her mind. That's bad. That's wrong. That is something. There's a shame. I shouldn't, it just intensifies everything.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can take this moment to begin to lay the foundations. And I was like, lay what foundations? My child's 2. I don't want to lay any foundations yet. It's too early. He was like, just trust me. So I just caught my breath. I remember turning around to her and just gently redirecting her attention. Oh, come here, not freaking out. And I remember I was like, please give me the words. Where did the foundations start? And I was like, wow, baby, isn't that so interesting? Mommy and daddy are so different. God is so creative. He designed boys this way, but you look more like mommy. You're a girl. I mean, elementary foundation.
Oh, yeah.
Simple. Took 30 seconds. And she was like, girl, and toddled off somewhere, And I just remember sitting back and thinking, okay, just like in any other thing in life, just like I would lay the foundations of the gospel and build on them as my child grew in understanding and maturity, just like I would lay the foundations of hygiene. I'm random. Hey, we're going to brush our teeth. Like and then build as they grow. Any way you train a child up in the way they should go, anyone would understand. Think if you have your son, somebody listening, and you love baseball and you want to teach them baseball, where are you going to start? When they're a little kid, tossing a ball back and forth with them, and then you're going to build as they mature, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we understand this principle of laying good foundations and building upon them at age appropriate times, or as the situation deems necessary, in all areas of life, in all manner of parenthood. And yet, for some reason, when it comes to the conversations of sex and sexuality and our bodies and God's design, we're like, oh,
yeah,
no, I don't want to put the thoughts in their head. Guess what? The over-sexualized commercial, Budweiser commercial that just came on TV, put some thoughts in their head, whether you like it or not. Like, I think sometimes we have associated such a taboo shame element, but sex is God's invention.
mm-hmm.
He created man, he created woman, he designed it for the goodness and glory in his context, in covenant. It's powerful, it bears fruit, it bears life, it's a good gift. But the enemy's goal, and what our carnal nature does with any good thing that is holy, is we make it carnal, right? We rob it of its goodness, we rob it of its glory, we make it taboo, we make it commercial, we devalue things that are precious. And so I just remember thinking, okay, obviously, like anything else I would approach with my children, this is a good thing from God. And it's detailed, there's layers, it's nuanced to understand. But right now, she was 2 years old, I can start to lay the foundations. And we just started at creation. Wow.
Yeah.
We're fearfully and wonderfully made. We're so different. That's amazing that we're different. That's a good thing. I bet we're better.
You handled that so much better than me.
Right?
I'm even thinking, I'm like, wow, you did that really good.
Yeah, I mean, and it was literally only by the grace of God, because part of me wanted, I had a past with sexual deviance, with porn, with all this stuff. So that was only because I let the Lord heal me first,
Mm-hmm.
that I could be calm in that situation and say, I don't want you to go through everything I went through because of my ignorance. So we are going to learn together. And as they've matured, here's what's amazing. Children can actually handle and understand much more than we give them credit for.
100%.
And I think many times when we withhold being teachers to them, when we withhold counseling them and things that are harder, we actually are operating in ignorance and allowing the world to counsel them at whatever pace it wants, or allowing their peers to counsel them. I was 9 years old when my neighbor took me down to our little fort by the creek and told me everything she knew about sex, brought me back to her house, showed me pornography on the scratchy channels on the TV. I was 9.
Oh yeah, the old like channel zeros or whatever.
You had to squint and turn your head, and
I
it's
saw
like,
something. Yeah.
yeah, I think that was a leg. It's like all of that. We'd be in ignorance if we think there aren't 1,000 forces trying to form our children. We would be wise if we would say, I was entrusted with these children, and I will take seriously my responsibility to lay a foundation and to build upon it. And with every season, with every new age, with every question, I'll be available and safe to answer and to guide. I'll tell them if I don't know the answer, and then I'll go find the answer. I'll press in prayer or study or research, and I'll be able to share. And I think the beauty of that is that you begin to cultivate conversation and safety with your children, so that when the day comes that whatever is being taught in their health class, that whatever their friend says they think or believe, or that whatever pressure comes upon them. So many children are sexually abused because they don't even have the right language. They don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Even in moments where there could be serious hurt or affliction on their life, they have knowledge, they have understanding, and they can come and talk to you, just like my mom created that safe space for me by always fostering healthy communication. So when I was ready to say, I'm dealing with an eating disorder, all of this, it was familiar.
Yeah.
if our children don't know a familiar space of safe conversation with us, especially around sexual things that our culture is gripped by, it's everywhere right now. We drove past a billboard the other day of a man with a full beard and a pregnant belly. And it was talking about something about reproductive rights. To a child, my children were like, what? To the simplicity of understanding,
Yeah.
they couldn't even wrap their heads or fathom. There was no saying, oh, just ignore it. We had to have a
We have the
conversation.
adult video store billboard exiting
Oh,
off of our exit up here. So I
yeah.
mentioned it last night. I was like, that is so misplaced with everything else here.
And whether we know it or not, our children are taking these things in all day long, every day. If you start to pay attention, you'll start to be like, oh my goodness. Sometimes I'm like, we need to go live off grid in a bubble because it's wild. But we're not meant to hide. We're meant to bring light into the world. We're meant to bring power and the love of God and the truth into the dark places, right? And so that comes with having to equip ourselves, having to find healing ourselves, having to equip our children. And I'm amazed. My kids, like I said, are 7, 5, 3, and 1. 1-year-old can't talk. He doesn't count. But I'm amazed, especially through my 7-year-old and my 5-year-old, the degree of what they can articulate, what they understand, what they ask questions about, what they feel safe to. I just sometimes sit and my heart bursts and I try to play it cool on the outside. Like, yeah, we could talk about that.
Yeah.
But it's like, thank you that all this hard work, laying a foundation, is like bearing good fruit. So I just encourage parents in that. And you know what? His mercy is sufficient. It's new every morning. So it doesn't matter if your child's 15 and you're like, I dropped the ball. I never talked to them. I never did any of this. What now? Begin now.
Yeah.
Begin today. Yeah. And that doesn't mean you sit them down and go haywire and start to talk about things that are going to make them just faint. But we can all begin somewhere and begin in a place of cultivating that healthy conversation and teaching. And you know what? A lot of times, especially if our children are older, it begins with the parent saying, hey, I want to apologize to you about something. I kind of dropped the ball here. I have shame from my own past or stuff that I dealt with, or I grew up and no one talked to me about this stuff. So I've never known how to talk to you. But I kind of want to see how we can do better. You know, it's like sometimes
show them that vulnerability.
Yeah, vulnerability, humility.
Yeah.
I'm not like I'm a serious disciplinarian, don't get me wrong, but the number of times I apologize to my children for my own stuff is significant.
Yeah.
Because who would I be to not apologize if I've hurt someone just because they're young, right?
Yeah.
So I just think humility, vulnerability, very key in that process too, but we have to lay the foundations and build on it.
Well, last question before I ask you about all the amazing things that you're doing with Bold Life, which, you know, I noticed the word bold is a lot of, so I really want to hear about that. But question for you, and I'm curious from your standpoint, you living on wheels with the family, all of y'all crammed in there hiding chocolate covered raisins. How in the world, because it seems like you're very strong in your spiritual pillar, how do you keep that healthy balance in that environment with your spiritual, emotional, social, and physical domains as well?
That is a great question. It is not without a fight internally and without prioritization and boundaries externally. We do not do it perfectly. In fact, there are many times that we will realize how much more we need to be prioritizing and creating the space to get in the word, to have undistracted time of prayer, like to be intentional, because we've moved through a season where everything else has crowded it, or it hasn't been possible, or there's been sickness, or the kids have sick, and we feel it. We feel it. I think sometimes, as I've talked to people, a lot of people will look at me or will look at other people who may be leading in various ways in the spiritual space and think, oh, they must have like perfect prayer life. They must just be in the word like 5 hours every day. They must just da 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 da. not true. Life is life, and life is real, and it takes that constant learning of, I need to be more disciplined in this capacity. We have to create this margin. This is priority over this, this, or this. That's earlier in the podcast, I talked about our family with boundaries and just having to be really clear on our boundaries. That rolls over into the boundaries of our time and our energy and our yeses and our nos to what we can do and when we can do it, so that the most important things are fed and there's space created for them. But I say at the same time, a beautiful thing, at least in my life, of walking in faith, walking in relationship with my husband, with my children, just like with my husband and my children, it's an all-day fluid thing that we are engaging with one another. The same in my walk is with my prayer life and pursuing him. And sometimes if it's been a day I have not been able to get in the word, I haven't been able to sit under discipleship and learn, it's just too much going on.
Yeah.
You better believe when I'm washing the dishes, I'm in conversation with him. I know I haven't been able to get in the word, Lord, but you're faithful to speak. Minister to me on whatever you see fit. I'm really struggling with da da da. Why do I feel this around my motherhood here or there? Like, just that constant conversation in my mind. We talked about it earlier. Sometimes there'll be a prayer and then an answer to prayer in the moment. I can't tell you the number of times I get an answer to a prayer or a revelation in the shower where I have nowhere to write it down. I'm like, what do I do with myself?
Yeah.
Or washing dishes or folding laundry, or these mundane or necessary moments in our day. Many people, it's like, I would love to sit down and spend 3 hours in the Bible, but I have to get to work by 6 a.m. and I'm not off work until 7:30, whatever it may be. I come home to 4 kids, just like other people come home to various things. But if you read in the scriptures, there's a woman named Hagar, and she identifies God by a name that is true to his character at one point. She calls him El Roi, the God who sees, because she's been cast out to the wilderness. She's overwhelmed. She feels the rejection. She's isolated. And yet God sends an angel of the Lord to her to minister to her in that place. And she says, oh, surely you are El Roi, the one who sees. And I think it's really important that we remember our disciplines are important. Our spiritual disciplines are important, just like our physical disciplines, our scheduled disciplines, our time allocation, our intentionality with the days we have in our life is so important. And our spiritual disciplines are important as well. But the beauty too of being in relationship with the Lord, if we are earnestly in relationship with the Lord, is that there is an always factor. I see you. I'm with you. Speak to me. I'll answer.
Yeah.
Ask. I'll tell you. And there is a peace and a joy that comes with that when life or circumstances is overwhelming, that breaks from a spirit of religion that would bring this condemnation. You missed your Bible study this morning. You're condemned.
Yeah. No food. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, man, I feel that because I want to be in the word.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a feeling of condemnation. That's just a longing and a missing of being fed by the one that I love. But I also know in peace, you're here with me now. And you see that I'm cleaning up puke from another kid. And you see that I'm wiping a butt because my son yells from the bathroom, I'm done.
Yeah.
Every time he needs help. And so I just think there's this beauty in this relationship and this peace that comes, that love causes us to desire to implement those things, but there's grace there that he's with us in that every day, always. And you need that when you live in a 43-foot RV with 6 people and you move and it wakes everybody up. It's like, I want to get up at 5 a.m. and just have my coffee and read the word. And it's like my child wakes up at 5:03. They're like,
you woke me up, Mom.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah.
This dynamic, I think it is for everybody.
Well, tell us about Bold Life and your books. I mean, basically everything you're doing, and where can they find it at?
Yes. Okay. So, Bold Life, our ministry, was birthed out of college. I thought I'd be in broadcast journalism. stood in ESPN studios with the camera in my face, counting down to 10. And the Lord said, you know, this isn't where you're supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't deny it. I was like, yes, I know. I'll follow you. Where do you want me to go? And so that was really when itinerant ministry began. People, like I mentioned earlier, were just organically reaching out for me to come in, testify, teach. So Bold Life was birthed in that space as the ministry, an itinerant teaching ministry. But really, I love that that was the name that the Lord gave me all the way back then, because it remains the cry of my heart. And it remains the commissioning to anyone that we can and are intended to live bold lives, holy and bold lives, to not shrink back, to not live gripped by fear, to not allow our circumstances to define our identity or our future, to not allow the shadows that things have been hidden in or that we are hiding in to be our dwelling place. We're intended to live bold lives of faith, bold lives of healing, of restoration, and that in our weakness, He's strong. He uses all for His glory. And so the bolder we are in walking in that, the more that it can be used for the benefit and the blessing of others. And that boldness is just kind of a constant theme. I'm very blunt. I'm very bold when I speak or teach. I make old church ladies very nervous because I didn't meet a Jesus that anything was taboo to. I met a Jesus that was able to reach to the deepest, ugliest roots in my heart and handle them. Nothing scared Him away. Nothing was too much. And that's the grace that I want others to know, because many of us play it so safe because we think some of the shadows are too dark, right? And it's like, if we would just be bold to allow what's there to be brought to light, we would see the power that comes upon us and the freedom that we can feel. And we would move forward without fear. And so the iteration right now that's taking, Bold Life, we've been ministering for probably 11 years now, traveling around the world, around the country, speaking and teaching, and small and large, audience of 2 people, audience of 20,000 people. It doesn't matter.
Sometimes those 2 though are more powerful than 20,000.
Intimate settings are my favorite. Oh, my favorite. That's discipleship. That's where but it's just been where the Lord has sent. When we know it's where He wants us to go, we've gone boldly and brought messages of truth. My first book, Wreck My Life, really testified to a lot of the testimony I shared with you guys here. But then the second book, Sex, Jesus, and the Conversations the Church Forgot, when I tell you that was a bold move to write that, no one was really talking about
that title. I love the title.
With. Didn't even need a subtitle. Enough people were like, you can't say sex and Jesus in the same sentence. I'm like, you sure can. And we sure will. And so that just, the way that met a felt need and continues to, is just so encouraging. And then my third book, Fully Known, An Invitation to True Intimacy with God, that was birthed out of, hey, if we actually want to walk in lives of boldness and lives of faith, we have to know intimacy with the Lord.
Yeah.
It's in that safe, hidden space that we hear from Him, that we know our assignment, that we are made well, that we are delivered, that we are healed, that we are transformed. And it's from intimacy that the works birth out, not from our own strength, rewind to young Mo, not from our own pride, for our own name's sake, that we live at the praise of man, die at the criticism, like not for our own identity, but when we know who we are in Him, when we know who He is, then the works that are born out of that become the works of boldness, of vulnerability, of transparency, of power that actually pierce the heart of people. And so our current iteration of all of that was that we knew intimacy with the Lord. He told us it was time to sell everything, to sell our home, to sell all of our stuff, and to mobilize, and to know what it truly means to be a sojourner in this world. That we're in this world, but we're not of it. It's not our forever home. And so what does it look like to lay down our lives to reach the nooks and crannies and everyone in the middle. I say that because I used to be able to catch a flight, fly across the country, be back in a day. Now we drive across the country, it takes 2 weeks. But the moments that happen in the middle that no one sees, that we don't share, but they're holy. They're wild. We've seen miracles. We've seen people get healed. We've seen brain tumors shrink. We've seen, miracle after miracle. We've seen barren women bear life, 4 miscarriages straight, carry and bear a child. We get a photo several months later. Here's the baby that we all prayed for.
How cool is that?
It's been amazing. But that stuff happens not because there's any power in us of our own. It's because the Lord's like, you know me in the intimate place. I told you what I want you to do because I'm going to put my glory on display. Are you going to be the vessel for that? And that takes boldness. That takes boldness to say, it's really not about my life. It's really not about my comfort. It's really not about my job promotion. It's really not about my income. It's really about something much bigger than me. And I think sometimes the death to self, in order to allow our lives to be used, good, bad, ugly, messy, to speak a better word, is one of the boldest moves any of us can make.
Yeah.
That's where we're at now. Y'all pray for us. We got 6 people and 350 square feet, more butt wiping and diaper changes.
Oh, we're going to put all of your links in the episode description.
Awesome.
Or for them to get books to find out more about Bold Life. My final question for you is, when your grandchildren mention your name and great grandchildren, let's say 100 years from now, when people talk about you, what are they going to say?
Oh, you make me cry on camera. I pray that when my children and my grandchildren and the generations that come from me look back, they would recognize or reflect that things took a turn and changed in our family line with my generation. Now, I love my parents. I love my grandparents. I'm sure there's greatness proceeding. But I hope that the generations that look see a mark on my life, my husband's life, this time, that things took a turn from victim to victory.
Yeah.
That there was a special power on our lives that reached the least and the lost, that did things outside of our own strength or power or bank accountability, that needed God to happen, and he came through. I hope they see the faithfulness of God, I guess I would say, in the ways that things healed and shifted and changed in our generation, but also in the ways that he worked through me for his glory and for the freedom of others out of this time. I hope they look back fondly. I don't want them to look back, full transparency. Some of my greatest weaknesses in the past are just anger still, rage, irritability. I don't want my children to carry what I carried and be angry or irritable. I don't want my grandchildren to walk in that. I don't want the reflection to be, mom was always mad, or mom was always tired, or mom was like always a loose cannon if we were acting out. I want them to reflect on the faithfulness of God. And when we were kind of young, mom would pop off about some stuff, but she spent so much time in prayer. She spent so much time just trusting the Lord. She changed. Things changed. I hope all of our children, no matter how old they are, reflect on, my parent was once this, then something shifted and they changed. And so I'm kind of like this, but I believe something can shift in me too. And I can walk in greater boldness or health or freedom or whatever it may be. So I guess I would say that I hope they look back and see the faithfulness of God on the inside work and things that shift, but also how that reflected itself outwardly and the way it impacted the world around us.
That's a really good answer. That's a really good answer to that, as opposed to just, I'm a kind person. That was really good. And final comments for our listeners out there.
I'm a kind person. No, my kids would call my bluff immediately. That's not what they'll say about you, Mom. It's not. Sorry, what were you saying for our
Oh, I
listeners?
was like, final comments for our listeners.
Oh yes, just be of good heart, be of peace. I just speak and pray over anybody who is listening, that if any of these words resonated or touched you, or um, resonated is the best word I can think of, in your heart or in your mind or in your life or in your story, be of good hope and cheer. There is nothing that can't turn around in a moment. There is no shadow that has authority to hold you captive in. There's no part of your story that gets to speak a better word than hope and peace and life and joy. And sometimes we just have to embrace that by resisting fear.
Yeah.
Someone needs to just pray the Lord would give them strength over their fear today, so that they could really believe the hope set before them. They could really believe my days ahead aren't going to be defined by my days behind. They're going to use those days in power for greater measure. And I know sometimes when we hear heavier testimonies or harder things or challenges, or something does resonate, but it actually triggers us. It's really easy to just shut down and to feel overwhelmed and to say, well, that's great for her, but she doesn't know my circumstance. She doesn't know the marriage I'm in. She doesn't know what I just walked through in my job. She doesn't know how my kids turned out. They're 27 and there's nothing I can do about it. No, 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 no. Be of good cheer and of faith and of hope that if we will continue to humble ourselves, heal, grow, learn, there's nothing that's impossible for the days ahead, or for the people ahead, or for the circumstances ahead. And so just end this podcast with a smile, because if the Lord could do it for me, he could do it for anybody. He still continues to do it through me in my moments of failure and weakness. He can keep doing it through anybody. It's who he is. And while there's still breath in our lungs, there's still really good reason to be full of joy and full of hope. So I hope that people remember that.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely smiling because this was a great conversation. This was amazing. I want to thank you so much. By the way, her husband's incredible. He's awesome. He's probably the easiest person, most likable person I've dealt with getting a guest on the show. But real quick, do you watch Stranger Things or no?
No, man, we started and it got too demonic. We said we could not do this.
He told me he's like, don't bring up Stranger Things on the episode.
Don't ask me about Stranger Things. If you do you, you do you. I said I cannot. I saw a Demogorgon. I said we're not doing this.
Yep. So yeah, I told him I would bring that up. But no, I want to thank you so much for taking time to do this. Folks, this is a stacked month of guests that we got here in January. Continue spreading the word, leave us some reviews, let us know what you're thinking of the show. We're going to come back next week with another great episode of the Shadows Podcast.